with a white shirt raise her hand. I think I'll get to you next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Anna Melikian, Protection of Rights Without Borders, NGO from Armenia. The first responsibility to investigate and prosecute war crimes is with the national authorities. Universal jurisdiction is also there to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice for war crimes. So we all have our duty to react. Every victim deserves justice. OSINT-based investigations by international human rights organizations, international media, were important to document and verify allegations of some of the war crimes committed during the 2020 war in Nagorno-Karabakh. Civil society organizations also have an instrumental role to play to document these violations, including to support access to justice for victims. With the overwhelming use of social media during the recent armed conflict, we are able to document violations through monitoring open source, but digital safety and security is also an important factor to take into account. So capacity building of civil society organizations is crucial, and ODIHR's work in this regard should be expanded so that CSOs are not caught off guard when it's time to act. Very often, when there is no access to territory, open source investigation tools are the only ones available to establish or verify facts on the ground. During and in the immediate aftermath of the 44-day war in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, a group of civil society organizations in Armenia, including my own, Protection of Rights Without Borders, have undertaken an enormous effort to document international humanitarian law and human rights violations, mostly based on open sources and interviews with the victims, including the displaced population and repatriated prisoners of war and civilian detainees who were detained in the context of the conflict. Azerbaijani servicemen themselves recorded and shared the evidence of their own violations of IHL when committing willful killing of civilians and persons ordered to combat, so those who no longer take part in hostilities, acts of torture and ill-treatment, mutilation, destruction of cultural and religious property, etc. So they disseminated it on social media, not accidentally, but on purpose, and their faces can be seen clearly. They posted mostly on Telegram, TikTok, Facebook. We documented acts of torture and ill-treatment, use of prohibited means and methods of war. We were able to geolocate them, including in case of use of cluster munitions in densely populated areas and incendiary weapons, spreading terror against the local Armenian population as a method to ethnically cleanse the territory when it fell under the control of Azerbaijan. Open source investigations also allowed Armenian human rights advocates to provide evidence when resorting to one of the international instruments to ensure the life and physical integrity of prisoners of war and civilian captives, to prevent further violations. I mean, by filing motions for interim measures before the ACHR and then later on followed by individual complaints in regard to hundreds of people in relation to whom video evidence existed that they fell into Azerbaijani custody. These videos mostly depicted acts of torture and other forms of ill-treatment, but they helped to establish that these people were alive when they fell into the hands of Azerbaijani armed forces. One of the speakers today stressed that, yesterday actually, that under IHL, prisoners of war should be safe from public curiosity. But in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, this was often the only evidence of these people being alive and hopefully to ensure that they will remain alive while in captivity in Azerbaijan. In case of some of them, this worked. They survived the captivity and returned home several months later. We documented, however, that some of the people in relation to whom interim measures were granted by the European Court, some of the captives were killed while in captivity and their bodies were returned. In case of dozens of them, despite the existence of video evidence that they were in captivity in Azerbaijan, again, posted by Azerbaijani servicemen themselves, Azerbaijan did not confirm it and did not provide any information about the whereabouts to date. With official investigations lagging behind, it is key that all actors who have capacity and resources to document violations of humanitarian law and human rights during the armed conflict help to ensure that justice is served one day or another for every victim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe if